Over 37 million people watched the insult in real time. A U.S. vice president looked straight into the camera and reduced a rising African leader to a caricature. He called him a puppet in uniform, a phrase soaked in imperial arrogance. He expected backlash, maybe outrage, but nothing more. Just noise. What came next was not noise. It was clarity. It was a response that echoed through parliaments, protests, universities, and living rooms. From Nairobi to New York, from youth activists to retired diplomats, the world watched as a quiet figure became a storm. This is not the story of an insult. It's the story of what happened when Africa, through the stillness of one man, finally made the world listen. But to understand why that moment mattered, we have to return to the day the insult was delivered. The studio floor buzzed with artificial urgency. Cold lighting, scripted spontaneity, camera rigs, and assistants trying not to trip over cables. In the heart of New York City, politics was being packaged. The studio audience was a carefully curated mix: corporate donors, think tank fellows, and political science students desperate for a photo op. The smell of hairspray and ambition filled the air. And then, the double doors opened. JD Vance walked in like a man rehearsing his own monument. He wore confidence like armor. He wasn't just there to speak. He was there to imprint himself on the headlines. The host, Grant Halbert, offered a soft smile, the kind he had perfected over 3 decades of televised interrogation. Grant was no stranger to controversy. But even he didn't know what was coming. The segment began predictably. Vance dodged questions with the grace of a political fencer. He had the timing, the charm, the rehearsed spontaneity. Then Grant shifted. Let's talk about Africa. Specifically, Ibrahim Traoré. The room contracted. The name cut through the scripted flow like a blade. Cameras zoomed in. The control room went silent. But JD Vance didn't flinch. He adjusted his tie, leaned in slightly, and spoke with surgical cruelty. Traoré is not a revolutionary. He's a puppet in uniform, a boy soldier who read a book on dignity and thought he was Mandela. He's a danger to West Africa, and frankly, a danger to civilization. He smiled afterward, like he'd just won a chess match. It was so casual. So dismissive. So calculated. No yelling. No gaffes. Just the soft weaponry of the powerful, spoken in prime time. The host fumbled to pivot, but it was done. The clip began circulating within minutes. The insult was out. And the world, whether ready or not, was about to respond. A continent away, in a quiet government residence outside Ouagadougou, the only sound in the room was the whirring of a fan. President Ibrahim Traoré sat with a small group, 2 generals, an economist, and a young poet who had recently joined his advisory circle. They watched the broadcast in silence. No one moved. The insult echoed in the room like a bell tolling for dignity. But Traoré, the youngest head of state in Africa, did not react. He didn't blink. He didn't curse. He simply exhaled, eyes fixed on the screen, absorbing every syllable. Then, with calm precision, he whispered. We respond. Not with fury. With purpose. It was only 5 words. But those 5 words bent the course of what would follow. By sunrise, the world was already on fire. Student unions from Ghana to South Africa issued open letters. Senegalese poets began translating Traoré's past speeches into French, English, and Portuguese, distributing them online like battle cries. In Brussels, a Congolese diplomat walked out of a trade summit mid-sentence. In Lagos, youth leaders organized what they called the Truth March, not against the insult, but in celebration of African dignity. Meanwhile, JD Vance was already appearing on morning talk shows, doubling down. "If we can't call out chaos, what's the point of diplomacy?" he said, smiling for the camera. But he didn't realize the world was no longer listening to him. They were watching what Traoré would do next. No press release. No angry tweet. No retaliatory speech. Instead, President Traoré met with students. He sat in a university auditorium filled with young Africans studying law, medicine, engineering, the very people the West had stopped seeing. There were no cameras, just one microphone. His speech was only 12 minutes long. But in it, he said, "They may call us names. But we will not answer to them. We will answer to history." That speech was filmed by a student with a shaky phone. It went viral. Within 48 hours, subtitled versions hit every major platform. The words were studied like scripture, dissected in classrooms and parliaments, quoted in songs and street murals. Traoré had done the one thing the insult was never meant to provoke: he had turned down the volume. And made the silence thunder. Across the Atlantic, veteran journalist Naomi Pierce was watching from her Washington, D.C. apartment. She had covered Africa for 2 decades, seen war, peace, coups, and elections. But this was different. She replayed JD Vance's insult. Then, Traoré's quiet reply. She closed her laptop, looked out the window, and said aloud, "This isn't backlash. It's a reawakening." She booked the first flight to Burkina Faso. She didn't want a quote. She wanted to witness what dignity looked like, up close. Naomi arrived days later and was stunned by what she found. No protests. No chaos. Just a population standing taller, walking with purpose, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. She met students who had memorized Traoré's speech. Farmers who spoke of him like family. Elders who said they had waited a lifetime to hear a leader respond not with rage, but with respect. Naomi called her editor. "This isn't a piece," she said. "It's a movement." Over the next 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. A coalition of African leaders released a joint video, not to condemn the insult, but to tell their people, "We see you." Global South nations echoed the call. Leaders from India, Brazil, and Indonesia offered support. Not out of pity, but out of shared experience. The insult had pulled back the curtain. What stood behind it wasn't just one man's arrogance. It was centuries of condescension, wrapped in policy and cloaked in diplomacy. But now, the curtain was gone. 2 months after the insult, Naomi Pierce published a letter in the Atlantic. It was addressed to those who still speak of Africa like a problem. It read, "You tried to reduce a leader to a costume. But he responded with character. You tried to divide. But you revealed how deeply this continent is united. And you thought this would blow over. Instead, it has blown open a door that will never close again." The letter was read aloud at a youth summit in Nairobi, where Traoré appeared, not as a speaker, but as a listener. When asked why he never lashed out, he said, "Because I wasn't defending myself. I was defending something older. And much, much greater." JD Vance returned to the campaign trail. Grant Halbert got his ratings. But Ibrahim Traoré got something else. He became the moment where Africa didn't shout, and still shook the world. Sometimes, the most powerful answer to an insult is to refuse to shrink. And in that refusal, history is written.